Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a concept that gets right down to the absolute core of trust, consistency, and honestly, reality itself. We're looking at a framework that treats a promise not just as some flimsy social contract, but as a literal, universal guarantee. It's an incredible thought experiment, so let's just jump right into it.
So here is the big question. Is there a power that breaks its promise? Just let that sink in for a second. I know it sounds super simple at first, but this is the entire foundation of our analysis today. We're going to test the absolute limits of trust by digging into the actual logic of a broken word, and more importantly, figuring out what it takes to guarantee that a word is never, ever broken. Let's start with a really relatable micro-analogy. Imagine someone who literally never keeps their word. Like every single commitment they make just falls through. Now, on the flip side, contrast that with a person who, without fail, always fulfills their promises. Intuitively, who are you going to trust more? I mean, the answer is instantaneous, right? We are naturally wired to value and rely on consistency. We base our lives, our businesses, and our relationships on the solid certainty that a promise will actually be kept.
Okay, so what happens if we take that exact same logic of human trust and scale it way up to a cosmic level? If our own intuition absolutely demands consistency from our friends and colleagues, how should we be viewing the mechanics of the entire universe? If the cosmos operates on these strict laws, patterns, and ultimate guarantees, shouldn't we apply that exact same standard of absolute trust to the source of those mechanics? We're taking our perspective and shifting it from the personal, everyday level right up to the universal.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The Eighth Truth, the Artist of the Universe and His Promise.
When we really look at the incredibly intricate design of everything around us, from the tiniest atom to the most massive galaxy, we have to ask a deeply profound question about its maker. The source material frames it like this. Is it possible that the omniscient, omnipotent artist of this universe would not fulfill his promise? Notice those two absolutely critical attributes there. Omniscient, meaning infinite knowledge, and omnipotent, meaning absolute limitless power. The text challenges us to consider if a being possessing total knowledge and total power could somehow fail to deliver on what has been guaranteed. Logically speaking, could the ultimate artist leave his masterpiece unfinished by breaking his word?
And you know, this divine promise isn't just some fringe philosophical idea or an isolated claim. There is an overwhelming historical consensus regarding this guarantee, and the sheer magnitude of it is truly something to pause and think about. First off, we have the unified, common voice of all prophets throughout history communicating this exact same truth. And secondly, we have the absolute verification by profound thinkers, scholars, and philosophers spanning centuries. They all converge on this one undeniable certainty. The promise of the Creator is absolute. Plus, think about the scale of effort involved here. For you or me, keeping a massive promise might require totally exhausting our resources or straining our abilities to the absolute breaking point. But for a being with absolute power, fulfilling a given promise isn't a burden at all. It is incredibly easy. In fact, keeping this promise is logically necessary. It's necessary for us as humans who naturally crave justice, it's necessary for the purpose of everything created, and it's entirely necessary for the perfection of His own universal order. Which brings us to Section 2, the mechanics of trust, the two excuses for breaking a promise. So, if it's really that effortless for ultimate power to keep a promise, why do promises ever fail in the real world? Seriously, think about it. When a friend bails on helping you move after swearing up and down they'd be there, what's the core reason? If we just strip away all the complex apologies and the surface-level stories, the actual mechanics of a broken promise always boil down to a very finite set of human limitations. Let's look at exactly what those are. And this brilliantly illustrates our limitations, because it really just boils down to common sense. There are basically only two logical reasons anyone ever goes back on their word. Step 1. Ignorance. I didn't know. They forgot, they lacked the right information, or something completely unpredictable popped up. Step 2. Weakness. I didn't have the power. They legitimately wanted to help, but physically, financially, or emotionally, they just couldn't pull it off. A broken word is always a symptom of either not knowing enough or not being strong enough. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what happens when we map those human excuses right up against the Creator's attributes. On the one hand, you have the excuse I didn't know, ignorance. On the other, the Creator's attribute of limitless knowledge. Boom, the excuse is instantly voided. Next, the human excuse I didn't have the power, weakness, matched against limitless power. Again, mathematically and logically impossible.
Therefore, for an omniscient and omnipotent source, going back on a word just cannot happen. The very mechanisms that cause a broken promise, ignorance and weakness, simply do not exist in that source.
Section 3. The ultimate guarantee. The day without doubt.
Okay, so we've mapped out the reasoning. We've completely removed the excuses, and that brings us to the ultimate scriptural seal of authority that confirms everything we just deduced. The Quran in Surah Ali Imran, verse 3:9 states, "Our Lord, you will surely gather mankind on a day about which there is no doubt. Indeed, Allah does not break his promise." That right there is absolute divine consistency. The logic we traced earlier that infinite power and infinite knowledge simply cannot fail is echoed perfectly here. There is no doubt, precisely because the one who made the promise lacks no power and lacks no knowledge to actually fulfill it. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to drop back for a second and leave you with a deeply personal thought. Have you ever experienced a moment where you waited for something, maybe against all odds, purely out of trust in the person who made the promise to you? Remember how that absolute trust felt. Now imagine taking that feeling, that pure, unwavering reliance, and anchoring it not in a flawed human being, but in the limitless, all-knowing, all-powerful artist of the universe. When a promise comes from a power that mathematically cannot fail, your trust isn't just hope, it is absolute certainty. Keep seeking the truth and keep asking the big questions. We'll see you next time.